Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your sources, stack them up, and unpack the fascinating stories hidden within.
It's great to be diving in.
Today's dive is into a truly bizarre and enduring mystery from Brazil. We're looking at a stack of sources you've shared: articles, documentaries, forum discussions, even old magazine reports.
Real mix. Yeah.
All centered around the strange deaths of two men found on a hillside way back in 1966 in a case that's come to be known as the Lead Masks case.
A name that definitely sticks with you.
It really does. Our mission: to cut through the decades of speculation, understand the key facts unearthed by investigators and researchers, and explore the most prominent theories surrounding this perplexing event.
Trying to figure out what really happened to Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel José Viana.
Exactly. This isn't just a crime story. It's a tale layered with strange objects, cryptic notes, secret plans, and theories that range from the experimental to the truly extraterrestrial. It challenges conventional explanation.
It really does. So many layers.
Okay, let's unpack this.
It certainly does have layers. And the scene itself was immediately unsettling, setting the stage for the decades of confusion that would follow. It was August 20th, 1966 on Vintém Hill, located in Niterói, Brazil.
Niterói, that's near Rio, right?
Yeah, just across the bay. But Vintém Hill itself is described in sources as being in a remarkably tranquil hills setting, almost pastoral. This quiet backdrop makes the macabre discovery there feel even more profoundly out of place.
And who made this discovery? It wasn't a planned search, was it?
No, completely accidental. The discovery was made by a young boy, identified in one source as an 18-year-old named Jorge da Costa Alves.
Just a kid.
Yeah. He was up on the relatively steep slope of the hill, enjoying the simple pleasure of flying a kite. As he made his way further up, he was stopped by a strong, unmistakable smell, the smell of decay.
Ugh.
Following the scent, he stumbled upon a clearing in the weeds and saw two bodies lying side by side.
Wow. Just like that.
And sources even add a strange layer to the timeline here, suggesting the boy might have seen two figures sitting idly in that very spot a couple of days before, perhaps on Friday or Saturday.
Really?
Yeah, assuming they were just resting or sleeping, and returned Sunday to find them still there, realizing something was wrong.
That detail, if true, that really complicates things, doesn't it? The timeline.
It absolutely does.
Yeah?
When did they actually die? How long were they there before being seen initially? It adds another layer of mystery right from the start.
That's an eerie detail, seeing them there, motionless and not immediately realizing. And accessing the scene wasn't quick for the authorities, right?
Precisely. Police were alerted, but getting to the precise spot on the hill wasn't straightforward. Sources note it took a considerable amount of time, up to 24 hours in some accounts.
24 hours, wow.
Largely due to the rough terrain and recent rainfall in the area. By the time investigators arrived on the scene, the bodies had been exposed for some time, and the environment itself posed challenges. Once they got there, the scene was unlike anything they had likely prepared for.
Let's describe the victims and how they were found.
The victims were identified relatively quickly, thanks to driver's licenses found on them. Manuel Pereira de Cruz, 32 years old, and Miguel José Viana, 34.
Okay.
They were electronics technicians, specifically described as TV and radio repairmen from a town called Campos dos Goytacazes.
Which is pretty far from Niterói.
Yeah, a considerable distance. Sources put it around 174 to 200 miles away. Both men were married, had children, and were reportedly well-liked and respected in their community.
So ordinary guys, seemingly.
Pretty much. Nothing in their backgrounds that suggested they were involved in anything dangerous or criminal, which made the scene even more perplexing.
And the scene itself was immediately weird. They weren't dressed for a casual hike.
Far from it. They were found dressed in suits. Some sources even specify they were wearing matching suits.
Matching suits. On a hill.
Exactly. Highly unusual attire for clambering up a hillside. And over these suits, they were wearing waterproof coats or raincoats.
Okay, raincoats could make sense if it had been raining.
Well, sources note that while it had been raining on the day they were believed to have arrived in Niterói, the weather at the exact moment they were found might not have necessitated raincoats.
Yeah.
This detail immediately sparked questions. Was it simply practical wear for arrival? Or, as one source speculatively suggests, were the coats intended for some form of decontamination, implying they expected to encounter something requiring protection?
Decontamination. That's a strange word to introduce here. It hints at something far beyond a simple hike. And the bodies themselves. No signs of a struggle.
This is one of the most baffling points. There were absolutely no obvious external signs of violence, injury, or a struggle on either of the bodies.
None at all.
None reported. Nothing at the scene appeared disturbed either. No overturned earth, no broken branches, no signs of a fight. They were simply lying side by side on a bed of leaves.
Just lying there.
Yeah. One detail noted in sources is that the foliage immediately around where they lay appeared neatly cut back, suggesting the spot had been deliberately prepared.
Prepared? Like they cleared it?
Seems like it. As one writer described it, they appeared to be resting, waiting. This complete absence of chaos profoundly deepens the mystery. If something terrible happened, it wasn't a violent physical confrontation.
Adding to the peculiarity, their watches had been removed.
Yes, reports indicate their watches were found removed and stored neatly in a plastic bag nearby, according to one source.
Why do that?
Another layer of deliberate action at the scene, right? Why remove your watch? Was it part of a ritual? Did they not want to know the time during their wait?
Strange.
Their pockets did contain some money and several receipts, which were crucial in helping police trace their movements leading up to their deaths.
But the money is a huge point of conflict.
It is the central financial paradox of the case. Sources report they had taken a considerable sum of money with them on their trip to Niterói, around 3 million cruzeros.
Which was a lot back then.
Oh yeah. In 1966, that amount was significant, estimated by one source to be around $1,350 US, enough to purchase a cheap used car at the time. They had clearly planned to make a major purchase or transaction.
Okay.
Yet when they were found, only a fraction of that money remained, roughly $68 on one man and a mere $2 on the other, based on details from a Reddit source aggregating various reports.
Whoa, that's a massive difference.
Huge. This discrepancy immediately introduces a powerful potential motive for robbery or foul play, but it clashes violently with the observed lack of violence or struggle at the scene.
Right. How do you rob someone of a large sum of money without any sign of a fight?
Exactly. It's almost as if the money disappeared without a robbery, or perhaps they were incapacitated before the money was taken, or they spent it on something related to whatever happened.
Those are precisely the questions the missing money raises. And the questions only multiply when you consider that truly bizarre items found with them, the items that gave the case its lasting name.
You mean the masks?
Well, before the mask, there are a few other things, right?
Yeah, right. 3 key items beyond the watches and the money. First, an empty bottle of water. Sources specify it was a glass bottle, and significantly, a receipt for it was found in Miguel's pocket.
And the receipt was important.
Very. This receipt indicated they had paid a deposit on the bottle, implying they fully intended to return it later to get their money back.
Which suggests they plan to leave the hill, not die there.
That's the implication, isn't it? It argues against a planned suicide, maybe.
Okay, so an empty water bottle and a plan to return it. Simple enough, initially.
Then there were 2 towels. These were found soaked and neatly packed away in a bag near the bodies.
Soaked towels, why?
Their purpose remains completely unknown. Were they for cleaning themselves? Perhaps for wiping sweat after the climb? Or connecting back to the raincoats and the mention of decontamination, were they part of some ritualistic cleansing or preparation process? It's another strange, inexplicable detail.
So empty water bottle, soaked towels, and then the item the case is named for. But wait, wasn't there a notebook too?
Ah, yes, absolutely. Before the masks, the notebook, found in one of the suit jackets, it contained pages that would become central to unraveling their final intentions, or at least documenting them.
What was in this notebook?
There were a couple of pages of extreme interest. One page listed electronic part numbers.
Like a shopping list.
Probably. Naturally, in a mystery like this, early speculation wondered if this was some kind of secret code. However, sources generally conclude this was most likely a genuine shopping list related to their electronics repair business.
Makes sense, given their job.
Yeah. While it's incredibly difficult to definitively identify specific Brazilian electronic components from 1966 today, the context of their profession makes this the most plausible explanation.
Okay, so a potentially mundane list alongside the bizarre. What else was in the notebook?
There was another page with handwritten notes detailing a schedule for taking capsules in the days before their trip to Niterói.
Capsules, like pills.
Seems like it. The notes read something like, Sunday, 1 after a meal. Monday, 1 capsule in the morning on an empty stomach. Tuesday, 1 capsule after the meal. Wednesday, 1 capsule before bedtime.
Whoa. Okay, so this clearly indicates a planned pre-trip regimen involving ingesting some kind of substance over several days.
Definitely planned.
And wasn't there a question about whose handwriting this was?
Yes, and this is a critical point of conflict between sources. One source, citing forum discussions summarizing earlier reports, claims that handwriting analysis reportedly found this schedule was not written by either Manoel or Miguel.
So someone else wrote it, giving them instructions.
If true, yes, that strongly suggests someone else was directing them, giving them instructions for this regimen. However, another source, the documentary series Historic Flicks, states that handwriting analysis concluded the script was consistent with samples found in Miguel Viana's home.
Huh. So could have been Viana's writing?
According to that source, yes. This contradiction is significant. If it was their handwriting, they were following their own or previously given instructions. If it wasn't, a third party was intimately involved in their preparation, dictating a specific schedule for ingesting substances. It's a fundamental question of agency and external influence.
That's a huge difference in interpretation based on conflicting reports. And then the most famous note of all.
The infamous cryptic note, written in Portuguese but with grammar that some sources describe as unusual or perhaps abbreviated.
Okay, what did it say?
The core translation, although sources offer slight variations, is chilling. 16.30B at the agreed place. 18.30 swallow capsules, after effect protect metals, wait for mask signal.
18.30 swallow capsules, after effect protect metals, wait for mask signal. What on earth was going on?
This note is the heart of the mystery, isn't it? It explicitly lays out a plan. Be at a designated location, Vintém Hill, by 4:30 p.m. 2 hours later, at 6:30 p.m., ingest capsules. After these capsules take effect, there's an instruction to protect metals, or as some translations render it, protect half the face, which is often interpreted as a direct reference to the lead masks.
Protect metals,
Good flow.
or face, with lead masks. Got it?
And finally, they were to wait for mask signal, or simply wait for signal. This sequence of events arrival, ingestion of a substance, a protective action, and waiting for a signal is central to understanding their final moments.
And the masks themselves, these weren't standard protective gear, were they?
Absolutely not. The lead masks are the most visually striking and puzzling pieces of physical evidence. They weren't like welding masks or full head coverings.
So what were they like?
They are consistently described as thin sheets of lead, appearing to be crudely cut by hand or with tin snips from scrap lead sheets. They were shaped roughly like oversized sunglasses, but with no stems, designed simply to rest over the eyes.
And they couldn't see through them.
No, the lead was opaque. Wearing them would have completely blinded the men, blocking out all light.
This immediately debunks the idea of them being functional protective eyewear. And it's widely stated they weren't effective for standard radiation protection either, right?
That's correct, and it's crucial to emphasize. While initial speculation often jumps to radiation shielding because it's made of lead, experts and sources specializing in radiation protection are clear. These masks would be utterly useless against any known type of harmful radiation affecting the eyes or brain in this manner.
So not for radiation.
No. Standard radiation protection covering the head is designed differently and would encompass much more than just the eyes. As one source emphatically states, there is no environment in which such shields would be useful against radiation purportedly affecting only the eyes. They simply do not function as conventional protective gear.
So they were homemade, they blinded the wearer, and they weren't for radiation. That leaves the question, what were they protecting their eyes from?
That is the core mystery of the masks. Were they expecting a blinding flash of light, an intense luminosity, something connected to the signal?
Or maybe something symbolic.
Possibly. Was it a symbolic protection, perhaps related to spiritual or occult beliefs, like shielding the third eye from an overwhelming vision or light from another realm?
And they definitely made these themselves.
Yeah, the fact that their neighbor confirmed they made these masks themselves just days before, on August 12th, using a hammer and lead tube scraps found in Miguel's workshop, confirms these were deliberate, prepared items. They weren't random debris. They were crafted specifically for this event.
Crafted specifically for an event where they expected to need to shield their eyes from something blinding after taking mysterious capsules and waiting for signal. It's a scene that defies conventional explanation. So how did the official investigation proceed with such a bizarre set of circumstances?
Well, police began the difficult work of attempting to piece together the men's final days by interviewing their families and meticulously retracing their steps using the receipts found on their bodies.
And that led somewhere interesting.
Yeah, the key finding was that Manuel and Miguel had told their families they were traveling to São Paulo to purchase electronics equipment for their business, and perhaps even a used car.
Right, the car money.
Exactly. However, the receipts showed they had actually purchased bus tickets to Niterói. This was a clear deception, indicating their trip to Vintém Hill was secret and pre-planned, not a spontaneous detour.
So they lied to their families, they knew where they were going, and the receipts led them to other places in Niterói.
Yes, they followed the paper trail. Receipts led them to an electronics store in Niterói called Fluoscope, where the clerk confirmed the men had visited just before their deaths.
Did they buy anything there?
Apparently not. He knew them as occasional customers for parts, but stated they didn't buy anything on this trip. They also tracked down the salesperson at a clothing store who remembered selling them the raincoats.
Ah, the raincoats.
And described them as seeming to be in a rush.
In a rush.
And at a bar, the bartender who sold them the mineral water recalled Miguel repeatedly checking his watch and appearing agitated, as if anxiously waiting for someone.
Agitated, waiting for someone. Okay.
He also confirmed giving them the receipt for the bottle deposit, further reinforcing the idea that they planned to complete whatever their business was and then leave.
And crucial witness accounts emerge regarding their arrival at the hill.
This is where the timeline and potential third-party involvement become deeply confusing due to conflicting witness reports.
How so?
One security guard reported seeing Manuel and Miguel near Vintém Hill around 5 p.m. on the day they went up, but he claimed they arrived not alone.
Not alone. Who was with them?
He said they were in a Jeep driven by a blonde man, possibly with 2 other men present. This witness account directly points to potential criminal involvement, people who might have lured or forced the men to the hill.
Wow, okay. That changes things.
But this conflicts with the account of the young boy who found the bodies. Remember him?
Yeah, the kite flyer.
He reportedly told police he saw the 2 men sitting alone and idly on the hillside at around 5 p.m. the same day, assuming they were just resting, and only became concerned the next day.
That's a fundamental contradiction. Were they escorted there by several men in a Jeep, or were they sitting alone by 5 p.m.?
It's impossible to reconcile these 2 accounts definitively.
Yeah.
Either the security guard was mistaken, or the boy missed seeing the other people, or something happened in that time frame between their arrival and the boy's observation.
Maybe the others left.
Maybe. But this conflict significantly hampered the investigation, making it unclear if they were victims of external force or carrying out a pre-planned solitary act.
And compounding all this confusion was a monumental failure in the forensic investigation.
Absolutely monumental, and perhaps the single biggest reason this case remains unsolved today. The autopsy was severely delayed.
How delayed?
Accounts vary, but it seems to have been postponed for days, possibly even weeks, with the official reason given being that the coroner's office was very busy.
Very busy. For a double death investigation.
Apparently so. And by the time the examination was finally conducted, the bodies were significantly decomposed.
And this meant they couldn't test for crucial things.
Exactly. The severe decomposition of the internal organs rendered them unsuitable for reliable toxicology testing.
No tox screen.
Basically, no comprehensive tox screen at the time it mattered most. This meant the investigators could not test for a wide range of poisons, drugs, or other substances that might have been in their system and caused their deaths. Any rapidly metabolized drugs or volatile poisons would have broken down beyond detection by the time the autopsy was performed.
So the capsules, they couldn't test for what might have been in them.
Precisely. One source mentions that the bodies were exhumed later, specifically to test hair samples for heavy metals like arsenic, mercury, barium, and thallium.
Did they find anything?
Those tests showed only extremely low, non-lethal levels, which ruled out poisoning by those specific heavy metals. But it did nothing to rule out a vast number of other substances, including potent psychoactive drugs or other toxins.
So the crucial opportunity to determine how they died was lost forever due to the delay.
Pretty much. The lack of comprehensive toxicology testing at the critical time meant a conclusive cause of death based on scientific evidence was never determined. The initial ruling by the coroner of sudden cardiac arrest appears to be purely speculative.
Just a guess, really.
Given the state of the bodies and the absence of definitive evidence, yes. Without knowing what substance, if any, was involved, or if there was some other non-obvious physical cause, the investigation was flying blind. The mysterious capsules mentioned in the note were never found at the scene, leaving their nature unknown.
So no capsules found, no tox results.
The complete failure to identify a cause of death is the fundamental roadblock.
It seems incredible that such a critical step was missed.
It is, and sources detailing the investigation frequently mention accusations of police negligence, particularly regarding the autopsy delay.
You'd think so.
This failure, combined with a lack of obvious violence, the cryptic nature of the evidence, the masks, the note, the conflicting witness accounts, and simply the sheer unusualness of the entire scenario meant the police had no clear path forward.
Just hit a wall.
The case quickly grew cold, leaving behind far more questions than answers.
With the official investigation stalled, speculation took over, and the bizarre details of the case lent themselves to some truly fascinating and sometimes outlandish theories.
They certainly did. One of the most prominent avenues explored by researchers connects the case to the prevalent culture of spiritualism and the occult in Brazil during the 1960s.
Spiritualism was big then.
Huge. Sources highlight that Brazil had a vast and active spiritualist community at the time, reportedly the largest concentration globally, with millions of followers. And significantly, the men were reportedly part of a specific group described as scientific spiritualists.
Scientific spiritualists? That sounds like a unique blend of interests. What does that mean?
Well, investigators found books and literature on spiritualism and alchemy in Miguel's home workshop, alongside texts on spiritist doctrine that included discussions of extraterrestrial life and even specifically spirits of Mars.
Mars, okay.
It appears this group wasn't engaging in traditional mediumship alone, but attempting to use technology and experimentation to bridge the gap between the material world and the spiritual or extraterrestrial realms.
Using tech to contact spirits or aliens.
Their aim was allegedly to contact spirits or extraterrestrials, potentially specifically beings from Mars, utilizing a combination of what they understood of psychedelic drugs and technological devices or radio signals.
And this wasn't just theoretical, they were actively experimenting.
Yes, according to friend Elcio Gomez, who was initially a suspect but later cleared by an alibi. Gomez reportedly corroborated their deep interest in contacting Mars.
What did he say?
He described them building a device in Miguel's garden that, strikingly, exploded about 2 months before the deaths, on June 13, 1966.
An explosion.
Yeah. And this incident wasn't just a private failure. Sources indicate that locals reportedly saw a bright object, described by some as a UFO, and heard an explosion corresponding to this event on that date.
So their experiment might have looked like a UFO sighting to others.
It's a strong possibility. Adding another layer of intrigue, a naval ship in the area allegedly intercepted bizarre, possibly unintelligible, radio communication around the same time.
Weird radio signals, too. Okay.
And this interest in connecting with higher beings or intelligences, whether spirits or aliens, provides a powerful potential motive for the strange preparations found on Vintém Hill.
How so?
The highlighted passages in the spiritualist books found in Miguel's workshop mentioned intense luminosity related to encountering spirits or aliens.
Ah, intense light.
This concept of overwhelming light offers a direct, if unusual, explanation for the lead masks they might have been intended to shield their eyes from the blinding light they expected to experience during this planned contact or visitation.
Protecting their eyes from the spiritalian light.
Potentially. One source even quotes an occultism expert suggesting the masks protected the third eye, a concept in some spiritual traditions, from the bright lights of a parallel universe or spirit realm they hope to access.
The third eye. Okay, that's getting deep into the spiritualist side. And the capsules fit into this spiritualist experimental context perfectly.
They do. The prevailing interpretation is that the capsules were likely psychedelic drugs, taken to help them achieve an altered state of consciousness, a trance state necessary for initiating contact with these entities.
Psychedelics for contact.
This idea was supported by Elcio Gomez and also by a self-proclaimed yoga professor familiar with New Age and spiritualist groups who spoke about the use of psychedelics for achieving transcendent states in some circles.
And this wasn't an isolated incident for this group, was it? There's that other similar case years prior.
This similar case is absolutely crucial to this theory. 4 years earlier, in 1962, a radio and television technician named Hermes Luis Vitosa was found dead atop a different hill, Cruzeiro Hill, outside Sao Paulo. And like Manoel and Miguel, he was found with a similar homemade lead mask beside his body.
Another lead mask. Same kind of victim. That can't be a coincidence.
It seems highly improbable. This earlier death, with the identical bizarre element of a homemade lead mask found with a deceased electronics technician on a hillside, strongly suggests a pattern.
Yeah.
It points towards these deaths being linked to the same specific scientific spiritualist group or a related practice involving these peculiar elements.
Do we know how Feitosa died?
Unfortunately, sources provide minimal details on the specific cause of death or the outcome of the investigation in Feitosa's case, leaving that mystery almost as deep as the lead masks case. But its existence lends significant weight to the idea that these weren't random deaths, but potentially part of a shared, dangerous ritual or experiment.
With all that context, the theory that seems to gain the most traction among researchers digging into the case is the idea of an experiment gone tragically wrong.
Yes. Theory 1. Accidental overdose or experiment gone wrong. This theory is heavily supported by the specific instructions in the notebook. The note explicitly directs them to swallow capsules at a specific time, 6:3 p.m., after being at the agreed place, 4:3 p.m.
Right, the schedule.
And the schedule found elsewhere in the notebook detailing a multi-day regimen of taking pills before the trip further suggests they were preparing their bodies or minds for whatever the capsules on the hill were intended to do.
The capsules then were the catalyst.
Likely. The capsules could have contained a powerful hallucinogenic drug intended to induce a trance state for their spiritual or extraterrestrial contact attempt. Or, less likely but possible, a toxic substance they believed was necessary for the ritual or experiment.
And with no tox screen.
Exactly. Since no toxicology tests were ever conclusively performed due to the decomposition, an overdose is a strong possibility. The complete lack of struggle at the scene aligns with this theory. They may not have been attacked by another person, but rather were overcome by the effects of whatever they ingested.
So they just passed out or died from the drug?
Possibly. They might have miscalculated the dosage, or perhaps the substance was impure, a bad batch, as suggested by the yoga professor source.
And the protect metals instruction fits too?
Yes, this can be interpreted as a direct instruction related to the anticipated effects. It could mean protecting their eyes from an intense visual phenomenon expected during the drug-induced state, or the signal, reinforcing the purpose of the masks.
Or protecting the face.
Or, if interpreting metals as half the face, it's a clearer directive to use the lead masks they had prepared. Let's try to immerse ourselves in that moment for a second.
Okay.
Imagine the quiet hillside as twilight approaches on August 20th, 1966. The two men, dressed in their incongruous suits and raincoats having arrived earlier, they've laid out their soaked towels, perhaps prepared their spot. As 6:30 p.m. arrives, they consult their cryptic note. They put on those crude lead masks, plunging themselves into darkness. Then they swallow the capsules, waiting in that silent darkness for whatever effect was supposed to happen, for the signal they were promised.
Just waiting, blind.
The stillness found by the boy the next day becomes chillingly understandable if their final moments were spent incapacitated by a powerful substance, lying side by side as instructed, waiting for a signal that never came, or perhaps came in a way they didn't expect or couldn't handle. This sensory aspect, the deliberate blindness, the quiet wait, the ingestion, it paints a powerful picture of an experiment in consciousness gone tragically wrong.
That vivid picture makes the overdose theory feel very compelling, fitting the scene so well. What about the idea that this was intentional, a suicide?
Theory 2, ritual suicide. Given the highly planned and ritualistic nature of the scene, the suits, the specific timing, the capsules, the masks, waiting for a signal, some sources have raised the possibility that this was a planned, deliberate act of self-destruction.
Like they wanted to die as part of the ritual.
The idea being that they intended to transition to a higher state of being or enter the spirit realm through this specific process.
But the sources you've provided seem to lean away from this.
They do. While the preparation was clearly ritualistic, there's a lack of direct evidence definitively proving suicidal intent. The note doesn't explicitly state they plan to die, only to take capsules and wait for a signal.
Right, it sounds more like a step, not an end goal.
Exactly. It feels more like a step in a process intended to achieve contact or a specific state, rather than an endpoint of self-destruction. Furthermore, the idea of using poison for deep transcendence in spiritualist practices isn't commonly documented and is questioned by some experts.
And the missing money.
And the missing money remains a puzzle for this theory. Would they have spent nearly their entire capital on this specific fatal ritual? It seems unlikely.
Which brings us back to the money. That significant amount of missing cash points strongly towards a criminal motive for some.
Theory 3. Scam gone wrong, robbery murder. The large sum of money they were known to be carrying, most of which was missing, is a key piece of evidence supporting a more conventional, albeit still strange, criminal explanation.
Like someone knew they had cash.
Could someone have known about their plans, perhaps through their spiritualist group, and lure them to the hill under false pretenses? The security guard's report of seeing them arrive in a jeep with a blonde man and others could potentially tie into this. Perhaps these were individuals who intended to rob them.
So they were manipulated, maybe tricked into taking the capsules.
That's the idea. Someone convinced them to take the capsules, perhaps framing it as part of the ritual or a necessary step for contact, knowing it would incapacitate or kill them. Then, while they were vulnerable, the perpetrators stole the money and left the scene.
And left the weird stuff to confuse everyone.
Perhaps deliberately leaving the strange items to confuse investigators. The suits might even imply they were meeting someone they saw as important for this encounter.
But this theory struggles significantly to explain the bizarre masks and the cryptic note, doesn't it?
It really does. Why would criminals stage such an elaborate, specific, and nonsensical scene? Unless the killers were themselves involved in the spiritualist group and incorporated the men's planned ritual elements to make it look like something other than a simple robbery, which seems overly complex for a standard crime.
And again, the lack of struggle contradicts a forced robbery or attack, unless, as you said, they were already incapacitated by the capsules when the robbery occurred.
Exactly. It's difficult to reconcile a violent crime with the peaceful, prepared nature of the scene, unless the incapacitation happened first.
And given the context of their interests and the era in Brazil, we have to address the most sensational theory, UFOs.
Theory 4. UFO encounter alien connection. Brazil in the 1960s experienced significant public interest in reports of UFO sightings, which provided a fertile ground for linking this bizarre case to extraterrestrial phenomena.
And these guys were into contacting Mars.
It's exactly. The men's known interest in contacting aliens, specifically from Mars, makes this connection even more direct. Sources mention witness accounts of a round orange UFO going up and down above Vintém Hill the night they went up.
Really? A sighting right there.
And another seeing an oval object emitting blue rays.
So the signal they waited for could literally have been from a UFO, and the light they feared requiring masks.
That's the premise. Could the intense light have been related to an actual alien encounter or their craft? Speculation within this theory ranges wildly. Maybe they died accidentally from exposure to alien technology. Perhaps they were assassinated by aliens, in one particularly outlandish version, as retaliation for their earlier device experiment, supposedly destroying a small UFO.
Oh, okay.
Or they were intentionally killed by aliens during a contact attempt that went wrong.
But the sources seem quite skeptical of this explanation.
Very much so, particularly the casual criminalist source, which takes a grounded, skeptical stance. They highlight the improbability of advanced alien species needing human help or having fragile ships that could be damaged by a homemade device.
Good point.
The skeptical view suggests the reported UFO sightings could be misidentified conventional objects, like military exercises, aircraft lights, or atmospheric phenomena, or even instances of social contagion mass hysteria fueled by media reports and existing beliefs.
I'll beat the Varginha thing later on.
Citing the widely reported but ultimately debunked Varginha UFO incident in 1996 Brazil as an example of how quickly sighting reports can spread and become entrenched. It's also plausible, as we discuss, that the men's own experiment, the exploding device, could have been the source of the observed lights or objects.
So while the UFO theory is captivating and fits the sheer strangeness, a more grounded analysis finds little concrete support for it beyond coincidence and misinterpreted sightings.
That's the general conclusion from critical analysis of the sources. It's compelling narrative, but lacks hard evidence.
Finally, in the history of this case, there was an alleged confession that briefly offered a potential resolution.
Yes. In 1969, 3 years after the deaths, a convicted inmate named Hamilton Bizani, already serving a long sentence for smuggling, allegedly confessed to a relative that he was involved in the Vintém Hill deaths.
A confession from prison?
Yeah. According to a newspaper report at the time, Correio do Povo, 1969, Bizani claimed he and 3 accomplices named as Espanhol, Acasio, and Wilson Almio were hired by a woman named Helena.
Who was she?
She was the manager of the very spiritualist center that Manoel and Miguel attended.
So a direct link back to the spiritualist community, but framing it as a criminal plot.
Exactly. Bizani claimed the motive was straightforward robbery. He alleged they attended a seance at the center to identify the men, knowing they were carrying a large amount of cash. Bizani's story was that they then drove the men to the hill, forced them at gunpoint to ingest poison capsules, killed them, took the money, and left. The newspaper report stated that Helena was subsequently arrested, and the police expected to apprehend the other accomplices.
That sounds like a solid lead, potentially explaining both the missing money and the ingestion of capsules. Why is this confession doubted by sources?
It's highly doubted and largely debunked by most sources that have re-examined the case. There are significant inconsistencies between Bazzani's alleged confession and the known facts of the scene.
Like what?
Well, if the men were forced at gunpoint, why were there absolutely no signs of struggle or violence on their bodies or at the scene? Why did the perpetrators leave any money at all on the bodies?
Good points.
Furthermore, Bazzani's confession doesn't account for the bizarre masks or the cryptic note he didn't claim to have created these elements, and they don't fit the narrative of a simple robbery and murder plot. The alleged timeline also conflicts with the young boy's account of seeing the men sitting idly and alone on the hill.
And critically, there's the complete lack of follow-up.
That's perhaps the biggest nail in the coffin for this confession. Despite the initial newspaper report claiming Helena was arrested and more arrests were expected, there are no subsequent reports in any sources detailing Bazzani being tried for these murders, or the fate of Helena, or the other alleged accomplices.
Just nothing.
Complete radio silence after 1969 regarding any legal proceedings related to this confession. This strongly suggests the confession was fabricated. It could have been a desperate attempt by Bazzani to gain favors while already incarcerated, a bid for notoriety, or perhaps even encouraged by authorities under pressure to solve a baffling cold case who then dropped it when it didn't hold up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Sources generally agree this confession is unreliable and likely false.
So we're left with multiple theories: an accidental overdose during a spiritualist experiment, a highly unlikely ritual suicide, a conventional crime that somehow involved bizarre ritual elements and left no trace of violence, or something connected to alleged UFOs, but none fully explain every single piece of evidence, and some are directly contradicted by other facts.
That's precisely why the lead masks case remains stubbornly unsolved after decades. The fundamental lack of concrete evidence is the primary barrier.
And that goes back to the investigation failure.
Exactly. The crucial inability to conduct timely and comprehensive toxicology testing is paramount. The mysterious capsules were never recovered or identified. There is no definitive, scientifically determined cause of death.
Plus the conflicting witnesses.
We have conflicting witness accounts regarding third-party involvement, and the ambiguity of the cryptic note and the purpose of the masks allows for endless interpretation but provides no single conclusive answer. The autopsy failure essentially removed the possibility of ever getting a definitive answer about how they died, which is the absolute core of solving any death investigation.
It feels like the case exists at a unique intersection of strange elements.
It absolutely does. It brings together technology, deep-seated mystical beliefs, spiritualism, possible drug use, and unexplained death in a way that defies easy categorization.
Yeah.
This confluence of factors is precisely what generates multiple plausible-sounding theories, from accidental overdose rooted in spiritual practice to potential criminal acts or even paranormal explanations.
And every attempt to explain one piece of evidence seems to raise new questions about another.
Constantly. If it was an overdose, why the watch is removed? If it was a robbery, why the masks and why the waterproof coats on a hill? Why no food or camping supplies for an hours-long wait? It's a case built on unanswered specifics.
The power of the imagery and narrative in this case is undeniable, which is why it persists as an urban legend and subject of fascination.
It is. The scene is so inherently bizarre. The suits, the raincoats, the blindfolding lead masks, the cryptic note, the bodies lying peacefully side by side. It feels deeply intentional, almost like a staged performance, yet ultimately unfinished and inexplicable. The stillness and lack of chaos at the scene, contrasting with the implied intensity of taking unknown capsules and waiting for a signal, adds to the unsettling feeling. The very idea of waiting for a signal resonates with human longing for connection or revelation. It has become mythologized precisely because of its profound strangeness and the lack of a tidy resolution.
It truly feels like a mystery that, as one source poetically put it, was never meant to be solved, only felt.
That captures the frustration. It's not just unsolved, it feels almost unsolvable because the crucial forensic evidence is gone forever. And the contextual clues, the note, the masks, are inherently ambiguous. It provides just enough strange, specific detail to invite endless theorizing and obsession, but not enough to ever allow anyone, decades later, to piece together a definitive, universally accepted truth.
So why does the story stick with us? Why do we keep coming back to the lead masks case?
I think it taps into fundamental human curiosity about the limits of our understanding. It involves secret plans, unexplained deaths, bizarre rituals, and the blurry line between fervent belief and objective reality. It challenges our assumptions about what people might do and what forces might be at play in the world.
What stands out to you from this deep dive? Is it the sheer, inexplicable bizarreness of the lead masks themselves? The chillingly specific yet ultimately vague instructions in the cryptic note? The deep dive into the intersection of technology and spiritualism in 1960s Brazil? Or simply the frustrating and lasting impact of a failed initial investigation?
For me, it's that intersection, the mix of electronics, spiritualism, possible psychedelics, the masks. It's just such a unique cocktail of the strange. And yeah, the failed investigation is just tragic, forensically speaking.
It highlights how the absence of clear, definitive answers creates a void where speculation can run wild, allowing theories ranging from the potentially tragic, an experiment gone wrong, to the truly fantastic alien contact to gain traction.
Absolutely. The less you know, the more you can imagine.
It's a powerful reminder of just how strange true stories can be, pushing the boundaries of what we think is possible, and how sometimes, even with clues scattered at the scene, the truth can remain stubbornly, perhaps permanently, out of reach.
Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel José Viana went to Vintém Hill on August 20th, 1966, with a plan. They brought cryptic instructions, prepared protective masks, and mysterious capsules. They sat down, they took the capsules at the appointed time, and they waited for a signal. Did that signal ever come? And if it did, what did they truly experience in their final moments, alone on that tranquil hillside, staring into darkness behind lead masks?
That was our deep dive into the lead masks case. This mystery continues to echo decades later, a testament to its enduring strangeness and the power of the unexplained. Thank you for joining us. We hope this dive gave you plenty to think about. See you next time on The Deep Dive.